Welcome to the Sober Heathen Podcast. I am the Sober Heathen, also known as Scott. I'm wearing my WWE Austin 316 to support my guilty pleasure of sports entertainment, as they call it. Today I got Frank on the podcast. Very excited to talk to Frank. Just saw Frank on your profile. You wrote a book? Uh-oh.
It's called Hazy Shade of Winter, My Dysfunction. I wrote this and I published it, and it's just a short book, and it talks about my life as a lifetime alcoholic, really, and a lot of the circumstances I've went through, and how I finally got sober after thousands of attempts of trying to get sober, or preferably cut back my drinking. At first I didn't want to quit at all. I just wanted to cut back and make everything right. I just wanted to be a normal drinker. So my book kind of just goes into my life and all of the things that I've done and bad decisions I've made as a result of drinking, and how I finally got sober. And that was by discovering cannabis, medical marijuana.
Yeah.
Back in I guess it was 2012. I did an internet search for medical marijuana for alcoholism, and the results really kind of changed my life. And so that kind of that kind of goes into what the book's about. I wanted to come on today and kind of just tell everybody that, and your followers, about my life and what happened to me, how I started drinking, and how it progressed and so forth. I know a lot of people I've seen on X ask themselves, do I drink too much, or what's wrong with just getting drunk on the weekends or whatever. So that's what I'm kind of here to tell is my story. I started drinking when I was 14. I came about it honestly. My father was an alcoholic. His father was an alcoholic. My dad's aunt was an alcoholic, and it caused family problems for all of us, and brought many of us to our knees. When I was a kid, I would take sips out of my dad's beer or my grandfather's beer. But I got drunk for the first time at 14. I was friends with a lot of older guys, 18, 19-year-olds that had just graduated from high school. And they liked to work on their muscle cars out in the garage, and we listened to music. And one day I drank 5 bottles of Miller High Life beer, and I was just blasted. And I was in love. I was just in love. The euphoric feeling, I just loved it. And all my older friends were laughing at me, so I was getting a kick out of being the center of attention and so forth. And I'm just like, I felt like I had arrived. I felt older. I felt accepted. I always felt older for my age, and that's why I was hanging around and accepted by 18 and 19-year-olds, I guess. Man, I just felt like I arrived. I'm like, adults drink beer, adults smoke, and so forth. And now I'm doing this, and I love it. I love the feeling. So I was on. So throughout high school, I made friends with other guys that liked to party. And, we had several guys in our neighborhood that liked to drink, and we would all raise hell, steal beer out of my buddy's dad's garage and so forth. And it just progressed throughout high school. We made friends with one guy who his basement became our party headquarters, and we'd sneak 12 packs and cases of beer through the basement window and go down there and just get smashed every weekend and all summer long. So long story short, by the time I graduated from high school, I had a drinking problem. I could finish a case of beer or a 30 pack in one night, in one sitting, by the time I was 17. I had ambitions of going in the military. I was going to join the Marines in high school. However, by the time my senior year had come around, I was having so much fun partying with my friends. I'm like, I'm not going to do that. I don't even know what I was thinking as far as that, because I didn't like being told what to do, and I don't know how I thought I was going to get through boot camp being a drunk every weekend. So after I graduated, I decided to work locally, and I worked several laborious jobs. I worked in a warehouse, and I continued partying. I made friends there that liked to party. I'd go to work still shit-faced from the night before. Sometimes I got asked if I was drinking before work, and I was like, no, that's the last night. Anyway, at this place, this warehouse, I met my first wife. We started dating, and it didn't really work out very well. She didn't like to drink like I did, and her parents didn't appreciate me always showing up with a 12-pack of beer, passing out overnight with beer bottles all over the floor. So they eventually banned me from. I woke up the morning of my 21st birthday in my truck, cab of my truck passed out in front of their house, because we had gone out the night before to a wedding reception, and since I couldn't stay in the house, there's no way I could have driven home. So I was passed out in the cab of my truck the morning of my 21st birthday. And we eventually got married. It only lasted a year. It ended when, in a drunken rage, we were fighting about something. And I took a full basket of clothes and I launched it down the hallway at her. And I knocked the thermostat off the wall, and she moved out the next morning. So that was basically a marriage wrecked because of drinking. Anyway, I got divorced. That was a 13-month marriage. It only lasted. We got divorced. I eventually got a job at a UAW plant, Chrysler plant, and I was a factory worker. And there was dozens and dozens of guys that would go out on the lunch break and drink, smoke pot and stuff. So I was all in on that, so I got to the point, then, this was in the mid 90s. I was drinking before work. I'd go to my favorite bar. I'd get lunch and have several tall draft beers. And sometimes I'd pick up beer on the way to work to drink in the parking lot before I went in. And then I always had a cooler of 4 or 5 beers on ice for my 15-minute lunch break. And believe it or not, I'd fire down 4 or 5 beers in 15 minutes and go back in smoking a cigarette to try to mask the smell, which, doesn't mask anything. So anyway, I did this for a few years. And one night, on a Friday night, I was out at my favorite bar, and I met my second wife. She bought me and my buddies, her and her friends sent over a pitcher of beer and shots of Jägermeister to our table. She had asked the bartender what we like, and she said Bud Light and Jägermeister. So she set that over the table. We hit it off. anyway, we bought our first house. We weren't married yet, but we were engaged. And one morning we got a phone call. We had an opportunity to move to Maine. She was from Maine, to take over a business that her great uncle had started, and then it had been sold a couple times. Basically, an opportunity to take this business back into the family. And I was tired of factory work by that time. I was so bored of it. Despite the great money I was making, I just really couldn't stand it. So I encouraged her to consider it. So we flew out there, checked it out, ended up making an offer and buying it. It was a grocery store, a small grocery store. Ended up moving to Maine. I'm going to try to fast forward some of the stuff so it doesn't just drag on. But the risk really paid off. The risk really paid off. We were making a lot of money. Ended up buying new house, new cars, and so forth. And unfortunately, my drinking then progressed because I didn't have anybody to report to. I was the boss. I was the drunken boss. You know, so I started showing up later for work or not at all. And since it was a grocery store, I took the beer right off the shelf. In fact, I ordered kegs. I had a old beer fridge converted to a keg tap in my garage, and I'd order Bud Light kegs from the beer rep, and I'd also we were an agency liquor store. I'd take Jägermeister off the shelf. So it was a really good arrangement for me. I'm sure she wasn't really too wild about it. And she wasn't, because a couple days after my daughter's second birthday, she told me she wanted a divorce, and it blew me away. In retrospect, I guess I should have known better, because I was always drunk. I wasn't pulling my fair share of the weight with her business. She said that she wanted a divorce, and I got really, really shit-faced that night. And then I woke up the next morning in a dumpy motel, and all I wanted to do was drink. All I wanted to do was get up and go get a drink. I didn't want to think about anything. But I didn't. I decided I was going to try to do everything I could to get our marriage back together. But unfortunately, it didn't work. But I did manage to stay sober for 5 months while I went through this very nasty divorce. And right before the divorce was finalized, I went off the wagon. I was actually with my daughter. She was 2 years old, and we went out to a restaurant, and I ordered beer, and I ended up having, I think, 5 or 6 beers that evening, and blew 5 months of sobriety. The next month, my divorce was final, and I moved down to Charleston, South Carolina. We actually already had a second house there that we had just bought as like a vacation home. So I already had a house set up that I could go to, thank God. But when I moved down there, I just totally went off the deep end. Sobriety was over. My divorce was over. I walked away with a real nice fat check in the bank, so I didn't have any money issues to worry about immediately. And I just went off the deep end. I was partying. I lived like a beach bum, at the beach all the time. Started hanging out at all of the beach bars all day and so forth. Do you have any questions for me yet, or my voice is getting a little?
No, man, I totally relate to a lot of things. I think a lot of people will. You know, that first experience with alcohol for alcoholics is, you said I've arrived. You know,
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like I totally relate to that. I relate to the type of work that you were doing. When I got into construction, that's when, everybody was drinking. In construction, you get a lot of drug tests, but I think the foremen pick the people that they know can pass.
Sure. Yeah.
Alcohol,
Right.
a lot of guys reek like alcohol, and I was one of them. Showing up to work. So I think the line of work too does have a big part to play with it. I know all about and can relate to having a bunch of money in my pocket um, well, it was my second engagement. I came home with an envelope, or I left home and moved in with my grandmother with an envelope full of money. And so I relate to a lot of the things that you've gone through so far. And you talk about, you had your daughter and you had some drinks. One of my worst memories is going to my old hometown with my kids and going to the bar to order pizza. And
Yeah.
I did that with quotation fingers. And I did get a pizza, but I also drank my ass off before I got to the bar and while I was in the bar. And
Yeah.
I
That
remember
was
driving
my
home
too.
and my kids crying their eyes out because I'm hitting the rumble strips and all over the road and I'm trying to eat this pizza.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I really appreciate you sharing all this stuff, man.
Yeah. The money thing, it's kind of like a blessing and a curse. I've thought about that many, many, many times because I made more money by the time I was 35 than many people make in a lifetime. I'm not saying that to brag. It was
Sure.
that's just the way the circumstances were. And I didn't always make it real, honestly. I mean, but anyway, but I think it was a blessing and a curse because had I been in that situation now, I don't have that kind of cash anymore. I was spending $10,000 a year on alcohol.
Wow.
My beer bar, my bar tab alone from my favorite bar, my American Express bill, was at least $1,000 a month. Just that one bar, not even considering what I drank at home, which was considerable.
Sure.
I bought Jägermeister by the case in
Yeah.
by handle bottles, cash and carry for $235 every 3 weeks, 6 of those bottles. And
Jaeger ain't cheap.
I thought I was being smart because I was buying it in bulk and I'm not paying tax.
Yeah.
The joke's on me. You know. Yeah. So Charleston. Yeah, I went off the rails. I met this when I first moved down there. I met this gal online. I had 3 kids. She didn't drink at all. I think I just hooked up with her because I was lonely. I knew nobody down there. I missed my daughter. I missed my family. And then one morning I woke up hungover, or maybe I was still drunk, and I said to her, "Why don't you guys just move in with me?" One of the biggest mistakes I've ever made. So they lived with me for a year before I had to give them the boot. And eventually met my current wife and love of my life in Charleston. She's from Charleston. Ironically, it almost never happened because she was too hungover to make our first date. She was to meet me at this bar on Isle of Palms, South Carolina, and she called me up and said she was too hungover from self-medicating the night before. But she ended up meeting up with me later on that day, and we partied all day, partied all night, and we're still together today, 17 years later.
Wow.
But we ended up getting married. When we both liked to party. I mean, so for years, a few years after getting married, that's what we did. We partied all the time. We traveled all over the place. We traveled all over the Caribbean and cool places, Key West, New Orleans and stuff, Savannah, just partied. But it got out of control for me. I got a good job at a supermarket chain down south as a manager. I got sent to Charlotte for training for a week. And on Wednesday of that week, I had gone out with a couple guys after our classes that day. There's a Mexican restaurant in the parking lot of the motel we were staying at, and they had real strong margaritas. And we went there, and I got tore up from the floor up on those things. And the next morning, my alarm went off at 6 o'clock, and I just couldn't even get out of bed. And, you know, I was a seasoned drinker by this point. I mean, I arrived at that hotel with a cooler of beer and a bottle of Jägermeister already ready to go. So I don't know how I got that night. I didn't that morning. I thought I was going to get fired. I knew when I pulled out of bed, I decided I'd show up after the and I ended up on my boss and I told him what happened. And then my I had to work early in the morning, like 5 in the morning. I called off work a lot and so forth. I actually injury.
Hey, Frank, if you can hear me, you're cutting up really bad. So I muted you for a second to see if we can get your connection figured out. But from what I heard, you went to training and you thought you had a rough night out and you thought you were going to get fired. That's kind of the last point that we could really hear you. But it's something else I can absolutely relate to. My fiance at the time, she had to drive to Detroit and found me butt ass naked, surrounded by bottles in a hotel room, and I got sent out of town to work. So I totally relate to that. I thought I was done for sure, but luckily I dodged a bullet there too. So, let's check back in and see how your connection's doing.
Okay.
Are you there?
Can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you.
Yeah. You can?
Yep. Oh, maybe not.
Okay, so
Oh, there we
try
go.
to pick up. You hear me?
Yep.
Okay. We've got for the Christmas holidays. I was supposed to go on January 2nd. However, I had partied so much on New Year's Eve and New Year's Day that come January 2nd, I felt like
We lost you again, my friend. Hopefully we can get Frank back and really dive into what brought across the change into recovery. I think his story so far is very relatable to a lot of us, a lot of guests that I've had on. Oh, lost him completely. Now that you're zoomed in, if you're watching, you can see the scar on my head, what's left of the scabbing from the surgery, the brain surgery that I had. If anybody was curious about that, talk about that for a second while we wait for Frank to join back in. Let's see that they shaved your back quite a bit if you're watching on YouTube. All right. And Frank is back, so let's get back into there.
sorry about that. Hopefully this will stay better.
Yeah, you're solid right now.
I moved my tablet around. Maybe I must have lost the signal.
Yeah, you're great right now.
Okay. All right. So I'm working at this supermarket chain, and I had faked a rib injury to be off over the Christmas holidays, Christmas and New Year's. I had my daughter with me uh, during that week. I flew her back to Maine, dropped her off, and I was flying back home. I started drinking on the way home. Um, I had 5 little mini bottles of Sailor Jerry rum packed in my quart travel bag for the liquids. And I even saw the TSA guy snicker as it was going through. Ha ha ha, I see what you got. But it was legal as long as it's in the quart baggie. Um, so I started drinking the Philadelphia US Airways Club on my way home, and I was pounding those Sailor Jerry shots and washing it down with the free draft beer inside that club. And then I drank on my connection back to Charleston, and I think I got a cab home that night, if I'm not mistaken, back home from the airport. But I partied with my wife all night long, and I don't even really remember much of New Year's Day other than ordering Chinese food at some point. But I was supposed to go back to work on January 2nd, and I was so hungover. I don't think I've ever been so hungover in my life. And I'm a seasoned veteran, and it was the worst I've ever had. I drug my ass to work, and I was just like sweating, dizzy. There was just no way I knew I was going to make it through the day. I'm just like, there's no way. And I had already pushed it to the limit with rib injury and everything else. So I couldn't say, oh, I've got the flu or whatever. My boss would know. He knew exactly how much I bought. I bought my beer right at our own store. He knew how much I drank. So not knowing what else to do, not having any other options, I walked out on my good paying job that day. And that was my rock bottom. That was my rock bottom. That was the best job I had had since I got divorced. And I had to walk out because I knew physically I couldn't do the job that day. And I had no other options. And I went home, and I think I had a drink, and I went to bed. And I don't really remember the next couple of weeks, to be honest with you. I just kept on drinking. I was on a binge. I think my boss had called me once or twice to ask me to come in and talk to him, maybe even consider company paid alcohol treatment, but I wouldn't have anything to do with it. I was like, oh, fuck you. I don't need you. We even took a trip to Key West to celebrate my new freedom from work. Went down there and partied for a week. I came back home. Things are starting to settle in, and I'm realizing what a mistake I made. January 29th, I woke up, and I was so terribly hungover, and I had such bad anxiety, I guess as they call it. I sat there in my chair just all day long, and I just felt like I was coming out of my skin. And I realized that I had to do something. I knew I had to quit drinking, but didn't know how. But I finally, as I was sitting there that day, I just made the decision that I'm going to quit drinking. And I was going to just pick a date and go. And just that decision alone I started feeling better. It's very hard to explain. Once nobody was there in that room. I didn't tell anybody, but I made that decision that I've had enough,
Yeah.
and I'm going to go try to do something about it. I started feeling better, and I think I felt better because I had a plan, at least at the start of a plan.
Sure.
So my wife worked midnights at the time, so she was sleeping when all this was going on, when I was contemplating all of this. And she woke up about 5 o'clock that day to go to work, and I told her that I had tears rolling down my face, and I said that I've made a decision that I'm gonna get help to. I said I'm gonna quit drinking, and I'm gonna get help to make it happen. That's what I said. And she said okay. She was supportive. I ended up checking myself into the hospital for 3 days to detox because as much as I drank, I was afraid of stroking out or,
Yeah.
shit like that. So I didn't really have any problems as I detoxed. I guess I had slightly shaky hands one night, but they give you Valium and stuff to counter that. It really wasn't that bad for me, which is surprising as much as I drank. But I got out of the 72 hours and I ended up enrolling in an intensive outpatient treatment program, is what they called it, MUSC, Medical University of South Carolina. And I did that. I think it was like a 6-week program. I went every day. They piss test you every day before you go in, make sure that you haven't been using. It wasn't just for alcohol. There's people that use narcotics in there as well.
Sure.
I thought overall, I thought it was a good experience. I learned a lot. I learned a lot, and listening from all of the other folks in there, I learned that, addiction, no matter if it's alcohol, drugs, or whatever, it's very, very similar. It's very similar. When you're addicted to a substance, you're a slave to that substance. So as I'm listening to all the stories in there, you really realize that all the shit that you've been doing, everybody else is too, and that's a good feeling.
Yeah,
so
you're not an anomaly.
Pardon me?
To know that you're not an anomaly is one of the
Yeah.
biggest things that going into a place like that can do for you. Absolutely.
Exactly. And over the years, I've been even on X. When I read stories on X, it's like somebody will describe certain circumstances, and it's like, my God, it's like I thought that was just me. I know. But anyway, I'll get back to that because I do want to make a point on that a little bit later. Anyway, where was I at? I lost my train of thought.
Sorry, I interrupted you. You were in the
That's all
outpatient
right.
program, and you learned from these other people that.
Oh yeah. So I did the outpatient program. Got home and so forth. What I found though is after I completed it, my afternoons and evenings just seemed that the space was so empty. I didn't know what to do with myself. I had all of this time on my hands. I had no hobbies. And every day, every afternoon especially, it was this huge void because I'd start drinking early and then go until I passed out or at 9 o'clock or whatever. So on May 5th, Cinco de Mayo, I ended up relapsing. And that was, I think 3 months after I completed that outpatient program. I wasn't celebrating Cinco de Mayo. It just happened to be Cinco de Mayo.
Sure.
But I went to an autograph signing earlier that day. Henry Hill from the movie Goodfellas. Do you know the movie Goodfellas from the 90s, the mob movie? He was still alive. It was about a month before he died, and he was doing book signings, and I had one of his cookbooks. I went down there and had him sign it, and my wife had just gone to work. Yeah, I'm sitting there in my truck, and I knew there's this liquor store right down the road, and I was so bored of not having anything to do. I'm like, fuck it. And I went on over there and I bought a 12-pack and half-gallon Jägermeister. Dropped another $50 on a product that I knew was killing me. So I relapsed, kept on drinking. So that was around 2012. So yeah, in 2012, I need to make one mention. in April of 2012, right after I finished the outpatient program, my wife and I had a vacation scheduled to British Virgin Islands. And it was an old party spot that we always used to go to and party, party, party. Well, my counselors at the outpatient program had warned me not to go there. They said, don't go, you're going to be tempting your fate. Well, I didn't listen. I went anyway, as I usually do. And I didn't drink that week, but I told my wife prior to going, I said, I don't know how I'm gonna get through this. I said, maybe I'll try to get some weed while we're in the islands. She said, yeah, sure. So when we got there, I did score a little bit of weed, and I started smoking a little bit then. But to be honest with you, I didn't really feel much from it on that trip. I don't know if it wasn't good or what. So then after I relapsed about 2 weeks after that trip too, and so later on that summer, ironically, this guy that worked at the liquor store that I bought all my booze, I knew he smoked pot, and I asked him if I could get some from him. So he set me up with a little bit, and so one evening I'm sitting in my chair at home and I'm drinking a beer, and I load up a little bit of that weed in my bong. I bought a little bong to smoke it out of because I didn't know how to roll joints, and I was like, wow. I was just like melted in my recliner. I'm like, this is great. I texted him, wow. He's like, glad you like it. Like, this is great, man. You know, it was highly illegal in South Carolina. Sure. It still is. So that, I mean, right then I was like, and I noticed I had like this sense of calmness, well-being, like a sense of well-being. And I didn't really, it's like the beer became secondary. You know, I felt like instead of guzzling the beer, maybe I was just sipping on it now or something. So for about a period of, I don't know, maybe a year, that's what I was doing. I was smoking weed if I could get it and still drinking, but I was still trying to quit drinking, but I just hadn't got there yet. Well, it was the next year. I don't know. I guess there was just one night I was sitting there and I was smoking some weed and drinking some beer, and I just kind of like had a revelation. Like I'm like, I don't need this alcohol anymore. I just don't need it. And I don't even remember the date that I quit. It was right around Christmas time. I think I quit for a few weeks. And then right before Christmas, I got drunk one night, but come January 1st, 2014, I got a brand new job and I wasn't drinking anymore.
Awesome.
Yeah, it was great. And didn't miss it. I should back up a little bit. As I mentioned before, I had done that internet search, medical marijuana for alcoholism. And I just started reading all about it, you know, and people's firsthand accounts of how it has helped them, you know. I read firsthand accounts of like, you know, alcoholics and how their cravings go away and so forth. And I was just fascinated because I grew up in the 70s and 80s, and I was always told, you know, stay away from potheads, and you know, and I usually did. I smoked pot in high school a few times, but beer was always booze was my drug of choice for sure. So it was just like a whole new world had opened up to me. I almost felt like I've been lied to and screwed by the government. I couldn't believe that the reality of cannabis is like the opposite of what I was always preached to growing up. it really kind of pissed me off, to be honest with you. So it threw me
Yeah.
into a whole new subject to study. I wanted to know everything about it. You know, there's all these wild strain names, crazy, and I'm like, God, I want to try that. Oh boy, I want to try that. I just really got into it. But so one night in late 2013, I was just like, I don't think I need this alcohol anymore. I'm just going to dive straight into weed. But it was $400 an ounce in Charleston at the time.
Yikes.
So I knew I needed to learn how to grow my own. And I was pretty confident that I could, because I've always been a decent gardener anyway. I like gardening. And I knew my brother had grown his own. He had taught himself from reading High Times magazines back in the 80s. So he gave me some tips how to get started, and I got some seeds online. And by 2014, I was growing my own and not relying on dealers at all anymore. And that's evolved. I mean, I've got a lot of equipment now, and that's really the one thing. I've had 36 jobs in my life that I can recall, because I've only been fired from one. I've quit them all.
Right.
It's because I've always tried to make alcohol fit into whatever career I was doing. And if it wasn't working, I ditched the career.
Yeah.
Like a dumb fuck, I didn't even realize that it's alcohol all along. It's ruined so many opportunities.
Yes, sir.
But anyway, you know, like I was saying, so growing cannabis, it's really like the only skill that I've ever stuck with. I've been doing it for 10 years. I haven't done anything for 10 years other than breathe and drink.
Sure.
So I guess that's what I attribute. I'm pretty decent at it. Decent enough that I'm satisfied with my results. So yeah, that's what I did. I stayed sober on my own for 7 or 8 years. I didn't go to AA. I didn't really like AA. I had tried it before when I lived in Maine. My experience was there's nothing anonymous about Alcoholics Anonymous.
Sure.
It was a small town where I lived in. I walked in and every person knew my name. They knew what I did. Some of them were customers of mine. A lot of them were. So it was just very awkward to me. And I felt like there was a whole quasi-religious aspect to it that didn't really appeal to me. You know, I don't knock
Absolutely.
anything that works
Sure.
for other people, but I'm very much a loner. Yeah, it's really kind of odd that I'm even doing this podcast, because I don't usually do this kind of stuff, but I do want to tell my story. But I'm really like the type that likes to handle things on my own and not have to ask others for, you know, it's one thing if I ask people for advice, but I don't like being told what to do.
Sure.
This whole, you know, it was very off-putting, them telling me, you've got to get a sponsor. It's like, go fuck off. Don't tell me what I've got to do.
Sure.
So I just pursued sobriety on my own. And I can tell you, using cannabis and growing it, it was really a life changer for me. I learned that it's not the demon that it was made out to be. I attribute, you know, smoking cannabis, like the high is to me, the high is like the energy you get from a cup of coffee. I mean, to me, of course I'm used to it. I know it puts a lot of people on their can, but to me, it's very relaxing. And in fact, when I have cravings for alcohol, if I smoke weed, within 5 minutes, it's gone away.
Sure.
I'm not thinking about it anymore. It helps me stay focused on stuff. I do a lot of writing, and I usually smoke before I write. And just, it helps me laser focus on things. And
Sure.
I've also found that sometimes I find unique solutions to problems that have been bugging me. I think it relaxes your mind and just allows you to think, take a deep breath. I recently read that when you quit drinking, you gain an extra 16 to 18 hours per week.
Mm.
And that explains, how I said earlier, the void I felt in the afternoons, because I'm not sitting at the bars for 3, 4, 5 hours chatting with the bartender anymore. I think that's a key, is you've got to find some kind of a hobby to fill that void. Because all of those hours that you spent drinking, you're going to have to do something else.
Yeah. And so I'm going to ask a question that I already know the answer to, because you've already articulated it. But has your life gotten better since you quit alcohol and started cannabis use?
Yes, it absolutely has. It absolutely has. When I quit, I ended up losing about 100 pounds, almost 100 pounds. I started working out and didn't really change my diet much. But when you're not slamming down 1,000, 2,000 calories of empty calories a day per day, and you start working out, the pounds come off pretty quick.
Sure.
I went from 315 pounds, bloated, fat, unhealthy, high blood pressure, anxiety. And I went down within about a year, I went down to 225. So I lost about 90 pounds.
Awesome.
And I got off the blood pressure meds. Didn't have to take that anymore.
A lot of people don't understand that. It's a beautiful thing that cannabis can do for you. Hi, Alice.
Yeah. Just losing the weight helps as well. Now, what I didn't mention is that in 2021 during COVID, I relapsed. I had 7 or 8 years sobriety. Must have been 7, I guess. In September of 2021, I relapsed. I'd been thinking all summer long, daydreaming about ice cold Red Stripe beer from Jamaica. And I don't know why, because that wasn't even my beer of choice. My beer was always Bud Light, but for whatever reason, thinking about ice cold Red Stripes sitting there on an island, pounding them. One afternoon, my wife came home with a bottle of wine to cook with. Well, I already knew how that was going to go. 1 cup went into the dish that she was making, and she finished off the rest. And the next week, she was bringing home 2 bottles of wine and drinking them both. So she went off the wagon first, and I had already been thinking about beer. Well, we found ourselves in the grocery store, and I'm staring straight ahead at the beer aisle, and there was a 6-pack of Red Stripe on the top shelf staring at me. And I said to my wife, maybe I'll get myself a 6-pack of Red Stripe. And she said, sure, why not? Because, that was kind of cute. Okay, well, I'm going to get me a couple bottles of wine then. So, after 2 years of COVID, I guess we were bored out of our minds. I don't know why. I guess I got cocky. That I thought I could really handle it. I really did. I thought I could handle it. I thought I was gonna drink that day and that would be it. We got the beer, and she got some wine, and I think I got a little pint of rum too to make some rum and cokes. Well, long story short, that first day I drank 5 beers and a couple rum and cokes, and I caught a real nice buzz. The next day, it was the first hangover I'd had in 7 years, and immediately went back to my old tricks. I skipped coffee that morning, tried to recover on the couch, on the chair a little bit, take a little nap, and then had a hair of the dog with my last beer of that 6-pack. And I said to my wife, I said, how about we go down to there's a Mexican restaurant down at the end of the road that's got great margaritas. And I said, how about we go down there and go get some hair of the dog, go get some margaritas. And she's like, oh yeah, that sounds good. And it was like, so we were right back at it. So on the way home, we picked up vodka. And long story short, it's been 3 years of hell trying to quit. Last 3 years, I've gained weight back. I haven't gained it all back, but I probably gained 40 pounds. Mm-hmm. And I've tried dozens and maybe probably hundreds of times the last 3 years to quit. I'm sober now. I'm not going to say how long because I don't believe it really matters. It
doesn't matter.
I was sober yesterday. I'm sober today, and I'm plugging along. I'm closing in on one of my longest stretches in the last 3 years. So
awesome.
We're getting there. But my advice to anybody who is recovered and considered relapsing just once is to not do it, because I thought I could do it, and instantly, as soon as that shit hits your lips, it brings back everything. Sure. I had the habit of drinking on an empty stomach. I always did. I like drinking on an empty stomach because I got a quicker buzz and a more intense buzz. You know, I used to have what I called the 4-hour rule joke with my wife. It's like if I ate breakfast or anything, I like to wait 4 hours or so before I start drinking, because then the food's digested enough. Sounds crazy, doesn't it?
No, it sounds completely logical to somebody that thinks that way. Like myself.
Yeah, I did. I mean, I was dedicated to that rule for years. It just worked for me. If I tried to drink after I ate, I was just too bloated and it just wouldn't go down well. If I had an empty stomach, though, I could just pound them. But that took its toll. Right after I quit in 2014, I went to a neurologist because I'd been having numbness in my feet and my legs. And as it turns out, I was diagnosed with severe alcoholic neuropathy. And basically, the alcohol over the years poisoned and destroyed the nerves in my lower extremities, my lower legs and feet. And the neurologist actually said it was the worst case that he's ever seen in a non-diabetic in his entire career. I haven't been able to drive a car in 10 years because I can't feel the pedals. I have to walk with a cane. My legs have wasted away because the muscles don't get stimulated anymore because the nerves are all fucked up. So that's an unknown condition to most people that drink. I tell that story to a lot of people and they're just blown away. I never knew about it. Yeah. I mean, you know, you always hear about liver damage or maybe pancreatitis, but not the neuropathy. But it happens to about, I think it's 5% of heavy drinkers and alcoholics. It definitely happened to me. I had no feeling in my feet. I've actually burned them before. Laying out in the sun, laying on a lounge chair, and the metal rail was real hot. My foot was laying in it, and it gave me a blister. I didn't even feel it.
Jeez.
Yeah. Yeah. So my advice to anybody that's sober and contemplated just trying to have one drink is to not do it, because I thought I could, and it just brings back everything instantly. I almost instantly started drinking just as much as I was before, which is about like a bottle a day, like a fifth a day,
Yeah.
a few beers or whatever. You'll go right back to it. It never goes away. Alcohol is the killer of all ambition. I heard that quote, and I've got to totally agree with it. I've had a lot of opportunities in my life, and but I always prioritized alcohol and pissed things away and put alcohol on the top shelf. Trying to think of anything else. You got any more questions for me?
Yeah, no, it's some interesting things, and I think a lot of people. I've used the word relate a lot in this conversation, but I'm going to say it again. Red Stripe wasn't your beer, but you drank it anyway because it was something new. Vodka, I hated vodka. For
I did too.
90% of my drinking career, I never wanted to touch the shit. It tastes like rubbing alcohol.
Yeah.
But
yeah, all right.
Yeah, I got to a point to where all I was drinking was fucking vodka because it's like, well, I don't really like it. Somewhere in my mind, I was probably creating this scenario like, well, I don't like vodka, so I won't drink it as much. But did I go buy just a half pint? No. Did I just buy a pint? No. Was I buying a fifth every time I was going to get vodka? Yes. So every time that I tried to test the water, it's kind of like you said, I didn't even attempt really to keep it what it was. This is how much I drank. I drank a fifth every time I drink. So that's what I'm going to buy.
That's exactly right. And I think that's the reason too. I think when I bought that Red Stripe and I bought that rum was because when I was trying to quit before I had gone to that rehab, my wife had told me, she said, don't do shots anymore. Don't be pounding all those shots. She goes, you pound so many shots. You're drinking 2 to 3 shots to a beer. She said, just sip on a rum and Coke. And
sounds so easy, doesn't it?
I was on a, yeah, right. Well, I did that once I did that once. We were somewhere and I stayed away from the shots. I think we were at an all-inclusive place or something. I was drinking the rum and Cokes, and it did keep me more. I didn't get quite as inebriated, but I was also smoking pot too. So I don't know. That was in Jamaica, man.
Right.
You can't walk out the airport before they offer you weed there.
Right. So I've told this story before, but I remember the first time I got high on pot. After trying, I lost count after 20 attempts while I was drinking. And I was like, this shit, kind of what you said earlier, is like, I didn't really feel anything. Like, what's the point? I don't understand the point of this. Oh, does this just smell bad? And then I remember in a desperate attempt, I had a sponsor at the time. And he's like, dude, you're going to die. So I give you permission, which is kind of stupid, to try pot. So I called my dad up, who grows his own. He's a farmer. And dad comes over and he teaches me how to smoke pot. And obviously, I remember the phone call. I'll never forget it. And this is exactly how he sounds. He doesn't listen to podcasts, so he won't be offended by this impersonation. But he's like, I got enough of the good stuff to last me 3 years, and I got enough of the good stuff to last you 2. And I was like, all right. So he comes over, and I remember smoking it in his truck, and we're sitting in my grandma's driveway, and I'm looking at the trees, and all of a sudden, all the colors are just so beautiful. Trees are moving different, I'm like, oh my God, this is the answer. Like, this is what's going to save me. Right. So what happened? He left the bag of it with me, and what happened was I wasn't ready to quit drinking, so I just ended up stoned and drunk all the time, probably wasting pot, wasting the effects of the pot. So I went through that myself, but I know so many people that were addicts that use pot in many different forms that really help them and is saving their life. And so I'm definitely pro pot. And I think that if you're an alcoholic, we look at pot as you said, it has the stigma about it. The devil's lettuce and all this other crap. Only stoners people are stupid that smoke pot. But it's like, I know a lot of stupid people that smoke cigarettes. And you want to make this flower into this negative thing when it's totally socially acceptable to go pound a bunch of poison at a bar after work and kill your body, literally. So if anybody's ever listened to podcasts, you know that I'm not going to judge anybody that replaces the drug that's killing them for cannabis. Like, I think you're winning. And if your life is better today than it was in your worst times, then you're in recovery too. That's just how I look at it. I mean, I
get irritated. I get irritated at, the old timers mindset. You're replacing one drug for another. Oh, okay. Well, cannabis is a natural medicine.
Is your life better or not? I think that's the question.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's like, but okay, but if the thing is if Big Pharma came out with a pill tomorrow that cured alcoholism, would AA be opposed to that? Would AA be opposed to people taking that pill that would end alcoholism?
Well,
I don't really see the difference.
Science may one day accomplish this, but it hasn't done so yet. It's right in their literature. So I'd hope that, yes, they'd be okay with that. But science has also produced naltrexone, which has many people that are using the Sinclair method to actually become normal drinkers or quit drinking altogether.
Yeah, I took
Suboxone.
When I quit, I was prescribed Campral, Campral, in 2012 when I actually, or I'm sorry, 2013 when I actually quit for 7 years. I was taking that and smoking weed. So I don't know. I really can't comment if the Campral helped or worked because I was smoking weed too. I think the weed had a lot to do with it, but I took that pill for about 6 months, and what that is supposed to do is reduce or eliminate alcohol cravings, and that's always been my downfall is the cravings. Is I can get through a few days of detox or whatever, but right out of the blue, cutting the grass or something like that, something very benign, can trip me into, if I get that stinking thinking in my head, it's really hard to get that deep craving. So I was taking that medication for the cravings for about 6 months, and I just decided I didn't need it anymore. I wasn't even really thinking about alcohol anymore. And then ironically, during COVID, after I'd been drinking for maybe 6 months, I went and saw my doctor, told her what was going on, and I wanted to get back on that Campral again. Of course, this is a different doctor. I've moved several times, but they wouldn't prescribe it. They wouldn't prescribe it to me. Their answer was I need to go to the traditional detox and rehab all over again. And that's what I'm opposed to. I've already fucking done that once. I've already done the intensive outpatient program. I paid over $1,000 for it. And I told her, I said, what am I going to do? Relearn what I've already learned? I didn't forget that. I mean, that's just crazy. If it hasn't worked for you at one point, all these people that are repeating detox and rehab time after time and spending 6 figures, it's like, if it doesn't work, look into other methods. And I told her, I said, I find it ironic that you refuse to write me a prescription that has no harmful effects that is meant to stop alcohol abuse when I can just walk in the grocery store and not even have to show my ID or anything or a controlled substance for alcohol, which is the poison that's doing the harm.
Yeah,
it's crazy.
That's stinking thinking, in my opinion, on her part.
Yeah, I know.
But you said something too, and I've said this from go. The one thing that I heard in my journey is connection is the opposite of addiction. And you brought up COVID a couple times, and that's where I really went off the deep end too. I was already really bad, but I was really, really bad when COVID hit. And you take away the connections that people have, and that's great evidence. Look how many people during COVID that happened to. I've had plenty of guests on that have talked about that. I've been in treatment, or I've talked with clients now as a recovery coach, that they go back to COVID. You take all these connections that people have, and you talked about the boredom, trying to fill the time, all you
Yeah.
had was time in COVID. So connection truly is the opposite of addiction. Now you have a connection with growing your plants. You wrote a book and you've done all these things. These connections can really save your life. And the connections aren't always, human to human. They can be growing something. They can be writing something. They can be, for me, it was journaling for a while. That was a connection to, my inner self in a way.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Yeah, it's really important to, I think if you're trying to quit, a friend of mine from high school is, he's a heavy drinker. He's probably an alcoholic. He's actually a beer sales manager. He's had that job for over 30 years, works for a beer distributor, but he drinks beer every night. And I know he's tried to quit before, and he's only made it like 9 days before, and he's just going out of his mind. Doesn't know what to do with himself. And I said, I understand. I felt like a fish out of water. I really think my number one advice to people trying to quit is if you're going to quit, try to have something to fall back on to fill that void, so that you're not staring at the walls. Whatever times that you're drinking daily, you're going to need to find something else to do during that time. And I think a lot of people jump into it without realizing that. I didn't know. I just kind of experienced it, and it sucks. It's like I had no hobbies. Drinking was my hobby. That's what I did.
And the hobbies I did have involved drinking, throwing darts, playing pool.
And if I couldn't drink at anything, I wouldn't do it.
Right.
It's like, if something was suggested, and I quickly run through my mind, okay, do they sell beer? Can I bring beer? And if not, I'm not interested.
I don't know why this popped in my head, but I remember taking my kids to the beach after my divorce, and I already planned it out. I drank when they weren't paying attention, and so we got out into the water, and I'm like, what am I going to do out here in the water? I can't fucking drink. So I had a half pint in my shorts, and I walked out as far as I could go where they couldn't go. They had their floaties on or whatever. Mm-hmm. And I turned my back to them, and I chugged this half pint, and then I filled it up with water and let it sink to the bottom of the water. Like, I planned that out. Like, I'm like, all right, I know what I'm going to do in order to drink with these things.
Oh, that was pretty clever.
All these plans, all these plans and this effort, it's got to go somewhere when you quit drinking, right? Like, Jesus, I used my great grandmother. I was living with her. Not to make this about me, and I know we're over our hour now, but she took my car keys. God bless her. She was 98, I think, at the time. And she hid my truck keys. I couldn't get them. So I had to call my sponsor, who she would listen to. And I was like, look, I got to get my taxes done. And I have a guy that's going to do my taxes for me. So I got to leave. Can you tell her to give me my keys? And he talked her into it, and off I went. I took my tax paperwork. It wasn't even the right paperwork. I took the paperwork with me just so I could go to the fucking store. But all that time and energy has got to go somewhere. You're absolutely right.
Yeah, I bought a couple guitars, and I haven't practiced as much as I'd like to, but that's my plan this winter is to start playing some guitar more. And I got my plants going right now. I'm a tester for Stars and Stripes Seed Company, so I've got some of their stuff growing right now, and things are going pretty good. I feel a lot better. I feel so much better having that booze out of my system again, though. It's just night and day. It really is. I got up at 5:30 this morning, naturally with no alarm clock, and I'm feeling good. And it's just the total opposite when I'm drinking. It's like I can't even drink coffee anymore. I love coffee, and it's like I'm so hungover and dehydrated that I can't even touch it. And it's just like, why do I keep going back to that? Right. Why do I keep going back to that? It's like there's so many negatives. It's draining my wallet. It makes you feel like shit. And it's just that few hours of a euphoric buzz. That's all it is. You're borrowing your happiness from tomorrow for a
Yes.
few hours buzz today.
Hell yeah. Well said.
You know, and another thing I wanted to mention, I've learned a lot. I've read some books in the past year about alcoholism. A real good book is Alan Carr, How to Quit Drinking Without Willpower. It's got a lot of very good logic and scenarios in there. I wanted to pass that along because if I come across a good book that I think it's worthy of somebody reading, I want to mention it. That kind of helped me a bit. But yeah, the one thing I've learned is a lot of things that were happening to me and that where I was feeling like the anxiety and so forth the day after drinking and so forth. I now understand what's going on from reading some of these books. Actually, what happens is when you drink, it's a depressant, and your brain actually secretes a stimulant to counteract the depressive effects of alcohol. And unfortunately, the stimulant does not wear off at the same pace as the alcohol. So when you go to bed at night, you had your last drink or whatever, you're drunk and the alcohol is going to start wearing off, but the stimulant's at an all-time high because it's trying to counteract this alcohol. And then the booze wears off, but now you still got the stimulant racing through you. And that's when you wake up and you're sweating and you got the shakes and you just anxiety. And that's what it was always causing that terrible anxiety and racing heart the next day. I never even realized it was I thought it was just me, that type of thing. It's just like alcohol's an illusion. It's marketed to us like it's relaxing, people on the beach playing volleyball, end of the day, you've deserved a cold drink. And it couldn't be further from the truth. It puts you in a stupor for a couple hours, but every problem that you have, it amplifies.
Sure.
It causes anxiety, it causes depression. And I was taking anxiety medication for years and not even really realizing that it's the booze, stupid. Same thing with depressants, antidepressants and so forth. It's like, well, you're drinking a depressant. Depressants make you depressed.
Yep. Yeah.
It's just that's the whole thing, I guess, that's kind of irritating. It's just like when you really realize the grand scheme of booze and what it really is. I read something that said if booze had to get approved for consumption by the FDA today, it would never make it.
Yeah.
It would never make it. It's lethal. It's lethal if it consumed in too much quantities.
Yeah.
Yet you can buy unlimited amounts of it.
Yeah. Well, and stopping it can kill you too once you consume too much.
Exactly. Too. Yeah. Exactly. Crazy.
Well, I really appreciate you sharing all this, Frank. And I feel like my opinion doesn't matter, but I'm going to say it anyway because I can. It's my podcast. That's
right.
You've made huge changes and strides, and so whatever has happened over the 3 years, you've made changes in your life that it's not like it was. And I want everybody to know that if you go from a daily drinker like I was, a fifth plus, and you somehow can turn it into drinking only on the weekends, you're a goddamn miracle. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So you never lose the time. Like when like you talked about that treatment, you were in that treatment. You didn't lose that because you've gone back. All that knowledge is still there. That sobriety time is still there. It's worse to beat yourself up about it than it is just to be like, okay, this is what happened. Now I'm starting again today. I'm going to not do it today.
Exactly. I see a lot of folks on X saying day one, I'm back on day one again. I relapsed. And I always like to chime in and say, that's, relapse. And sometimes that's part of the journey. That's part of the journey to sobriety. Very few people, I think, that are serious drinkers or addicted are able to quit on the very first try and make it stick for years and years or forever. I don't know of any, to be honest with you. My dad didn't. My dad took 1,000,000 times. My grandfather. I don't know of anybody that really. Relapse is part of it, and I think you learn a bit every time. It's taken me a long time. I've relapsed. If I had $1 for every time I relapsed, I could pay my house off. But eventually, I do think you're going to get to that point that you're just like, I'm fucking done with this, man. I'm going to try a different path because I've been doing this for the same thing over and over and over. It's like walking into a wall and bumping into it over and over. How many times you got to do it before you finally turn?
Yeah.
So you can keep on moving. And everybody's different. I mean, God only knows. I shouldn't even be alive right now. But I finally decided, I think I'm finally there again. I feel like I'm finally there again. I hope. And I've got the good fortune of knowing now how good sobriety can be, because I did have 7 years of it. So I think it might be a bit easier for me than somebody that's never done it before. Again, like I said, I think the key thing is to find yourself something that you're interested in. I said the other day to somebody on X, I said, think about whatever it is that you've always wanted to do. Maybe you've always wanted to learn Spanish or play guitar, or whatever the case may be. That's a perfect time to look into something like that, because it's a great diversion.
Yeah.
It's a great diversion to occupy those hours that you're not drinking anymore. You've got 16 to 18 extra hours a week. Most people never have enough time.
Sure.
Go enjoy it. Go do something you want. Fuck the booze.
Yeah. Do something today that tomorrow you will thank you for.
That's right.
If today is just making it through without a drink, tomorrow you're going to thank you for that.
That's right. You're never gonna regret tomorrow the drink you didn't take today.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, that's good stuff, Frank. I appreciate you coming on, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Well, so this I will send you a link to the once it's uploaded. I'll send you a link to that, and then it'll be pinned to my profile for anybody that's coming in late that wants to catch the first part of it. We had a little bit of technical issues for a minute, but we got through it.
Yeah.
And this will be up on Spotify and Apple shortly after that. So thanks again, my friend.
Cool. Thanks. And if anybody wants to check out my book, it's called Hazy Shade of Winter, and it's available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and pretty much major outlets around the world.
Well, you're going to sell at least one, because every person I've had on that has a book, I bought it. So you're going to at least get one out of it.
All right.
All right. Well, again, that was Hazy Shade of Winter. Check it out. I found it pretty quickly. He's got a link on his profile on X too, if you follow Frank on X. Go ahead and grab that.
Yeah, my handle is @FJBurrows on X. It's the handle is the username Growing Ganja with the Irie Pirate.
And I got the handle as part of the title on this, so if you just find that, you copy and paste and find them. So
awesome.
All right, thanks again, Frank.
Okay, thank you.